My name is Sherry. I'm a bit of a nerd. My parents didn't expect me to behave differently than my brother. I remember being a little girl at the park with my parents on a hot day, and the boys were running around with their shirts off. I wanted to too, and my parents let me. As a kid, I was always curious about sex, or rather, sex-related things. I remember my mom reading a book to me about the birds and the bees, a common expression used to talk about sexual relationships in the US when I was a preschooler. Interestingly, I only remember the part about chickens. Anyway, as I grew up and became a teenager, I became more interested in sex. In middle school, I stumbled across a copy of Judy Blume's book Forever at the library. It was a story about teenage sexuality. I read it and returned it, and later I decided to read it again, but I couldn't find it. I asked the librarian about it, and she told me I was too young to read that book. I did not find it again at the library. I found out later that Forever is frequently a target for censorship, and in the 1990s was number 7 on the most frequently challenged books list in America. But I grew up in a house with lots of books. I eventually found Clan of the Cave Bear by Jean M. Auel, a prehistorical fiction novel. Among other things, it talked about rape as a weapon of power and the reintroduction of sex as an act of love. It was a lot to think about. I also found a book called Everything You Always Wanted to Know About Sex, but Were Afraid to Ask, by David Rubin. That book had been published in 1969, but around 1991, I read that book cover to cover. When I was done, I snuck it back on the shelf, confident that my mom never noticed its absence. But I was wrong. One day, when I had a sex question, I went back to refer to the book. There was no internet in those days, and it was gone. It had been replaced by The Kinsey Institute New Report on Sex by June M. Reinisch, published in 1991. My mom realized I had read that old book and worried that I wasn't getting good, accurate information. So she found the best book at that time and put it in the same place on the shelf. My mom knew me. Later, when I was halfway through high school, my mom found my porn stash. It wasn't really magazines with naked women in them. No, they were magazines with dirty stories in them. There were a few pictures of naked people in them, but that really wasn't the point of those magazines. My mom was really upset and told me that I was doing bad things by looking at those magazines. She told me that all the stories are just written by bad men, even the ones with women's names. They weren't really women because women don't write those types of stories, she said. And I began to feel bad about my interest in sex. I had a lot of shame about that event with my mom, and it took me many years to escape that. That was what motivated me to learn about sex and sexuality. I wanted to be normal. It turns out that I was 100% normal. So many people are interested in sex, And so many people feel deep shame about that interest, just like me. Now, I love reading and researching to find my answers, but sorting through the bad information to find the good information can be difficult. And not all people like to find answers in the same way that I do, but many people do want to know the information. They want to know they aren't alone. They want to know they are normal.